So, good morning, everybody. My name is Ole Burell. I'm Vice Mayor of Stockholm and Commissioner for Schools. And of course, it's a fantastic privilege for me to wish you welcome, Professor Case and Professor Deaton. And as we understand, this is a big day for us all. And I'm very proud that you have chosen to come to this fantastic school, which is a pride for Stockholm, the Stockholm Science and Innovation School. So we have our principal, or you say rector in Scotland, don't you? Patrick Westerberg. So thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you. Perhaps we should all give a big applause for our we have had some hectic times here reading up some of your studies and different papers that you've been reading. You've been writing quite a lot, both of you, I must say. It's very nice to have you here, and I would say that in according to the different things that you've been writing, it's very nice to have you here also because this is a contradictionary that we have the school right here at this place. Stockholm Science Innovation School is an upper secondary school situated here in Kista, which is one of the biggest IT hubs in the world, but also one of the more challenging areas when it comes to socioeconomic difficulties. And when the school started, well, we had some challenges. How do you provide dreams to kids in an area where there are perhaps not that many dreams? What we've done is that we actually work together with everyone out here, work together with companies, with universities, high schools, to create incentives, innovations, dreams into children. And what you see in front of you are kids from all over the city of Stockholm mixing together here with a purpose. Also, we're trying to cross things, and cross in the sense that we want to not only be a technical college, we want to be an economical college, a socio-economic, and so forth, so that inventions can aspire. And for that, we actually took after some of the leading companies that we have here in Sweden and in the world. We have a coffee place, because that's where most of the inventions are created. We spoke with Ericsson here, for instance, where they create most of their patents is by the coffee machine. Half of the patents are created there. So we have a coffee machine here where all the students and personnel can meet and discuss and have talks in that sense. And also I'm very proud of that we are a part of the city of Stockholm, the municipal school in that sense. Which shows that there's a lot of strength when a city commits together with the environment and the companies, university, to create something. We will now have a bit of talks and discussions. The students have prepared for some questions and a bit of Q&A in that sense. I will provide a microphone, this one, and the students will have the second one here.
So we usually ask people that are visiting, how did you get where you are today?
Okay, how did I get where? Well, we came in a wonderful BMW. And that's how we got from the city center up here. So, and I'm sure that you guys came somewhat differently. But to answer your question more seriously, one of the things I'd like to talk about when people ask me that question is, you know, how much luck I've had in my life. And for me, I think there's a tendency for people who are successful to look back and say, you know, it was all because I was a genius or because it was hard work or because of those things. And those things are true. I mean, you have to seize opportunity when it comes. But I think luck is very important for most And so there's a part of that which is worth knowing about, which is, you know, being prepared to take opportunities when they come. And when things come along and they're not what you thought you were going to do, sometimes it's a good idea to go that way anyway. So luck is really important, and seize the chances when they come along.
The next question we would like to ask is, what would you say drives you the most in your research?
Oh, I think for me it's really well, I've been trying very hard to get a Nobel Prize for 55 years. Without the Nobel Prize, I wouldn't have done any work. Of course, that's not true at all. Economists think that. You know, it's surprising. They think that these prizes are very important for getting people to work hard. And I can say that now, but of course it was not true for me at all. I think what was really important for me was just curiosity, and that I've always been interested in the next thing and what I was doing. And also, for me, and this is something that might be helpful to a lot of you, I was never the smartest kid in my class, so I had a lot of trouble often understanding things. So I was always jealous. I would look around, and there were other kids in the class, or there were other colleagues who'd understood things just immediately, easily. The teacher would have said, here's this complicated concept, and some people would always get it really fast, and I would never be the first person to get it. I was never the last person either, but you know, I was not the first person to get it. And for many, many years, I used to think that that was a terrible drawback. And it really is not, because I think, you know, I would have to worry about it and work at it and sort of pull it apart and try to understand it. And even if I wasn't the first to get there, I'd often find something along the way that someone else might have missed. So that I think slow understanding, slow but thorough understanding, you know, I like to think of shaking something or pulling it apart and trying to find what it is. And you know, that is a good way. I love the word innovation, which is, I guess, in your title, and is such a central part of here. And innovation often comes not from startlingly new things, but from looking at something that everybody else thinks they understand, and then you discover there's some little bit of it you don't understand. So, you know, if you're not the quickest kid in your class, and you can't all be the quickest kid in your class, don't worry about it, because, you know, it's your individuality and what you bring to it that in the end will produce the innovations that really matter.
I think that was really inspiring for many students here. I'd like to ask, for a lot of students who maybe hasn't read up on your research, and if you could summarize it a little shortly, maybe, just so the few people who hasn't had time because of studies.
Yeah. You know, one thing that makes it really hard to summarize your research is if you're really old, like I have. You know, I've been doing it for a long time, and I've done a lot of different things, which is, you know, my colleague and wife here, Ann Case, will tell you that I'm very fickle, meaning I get bored very easily with a problem, and we'll move on to a new problem. So it would really be hard for me to summarize all the different things I've worked on. So let me, instead of answering that question, I'll tell you one of the most favorite things, one of the best ideas, which I think, and I still think about now. What I want you to think about is, and I talked about this in answer to the first question about luck. I think luck is very important for a lot of things that happen in society. And one idea I really like is this idea. Imagine that you were all sitting around, or 6 or 10 of you are sitting around a table with a roulette wheel, and you're playing roulette on that. And you all started off with an equal number of chips. So you have, you know, 50 chips worth however many thousand kroner. And you start playing the game. And there's nothing, the wheel is completely fair. It spins and different numbers come up. And some of you are more skilled than others, and some of you are just playing by blind chance. And if you think what will happen is that very stable, stationary process that's just spinning luck. You know, the ball comes down by luck every time. Well, in the end, take a bunch of equal people and make them progressively more unequal over time. Because some people, after a few hours of play, will have enormous stacks of chips, and other people will have no stacks of chips at all. And that, in many ways, is the way that the world works, that we're all exposed to this chance all the time, but the effects of those chance accumulate, and they accumulate into inequality and increasing inequality. So that's one of the things I think about a lot. A way of qualifying that is, in some senses, society can set up mechanisms which help modify that inequality. So, for instance, you can imagine society saying, you can only bet on the red, or you can only bet on the black, and that would limit the speed with which inequality rose, because everybody then would get a similar draw at each time. The other thing you could do is you could have a social mechanism which says, as soon as your pile gets below a certain height, you have to take 10% off at the top and give it to everybody else, right? Or you could say, if your pile gets down to the last one or two, the bank takes some money off everybody else and gives you some back. And if that happened, that would limit the spread of inequality. And that's sort of a metaphor for the way society can modify the effects of accumulated luck to the point. And it makes you realize, I think, that you know, even if your skill at the table and the luck of the draw drives us all apart, I mean, society has ways of bringing us together too, and those are under our collective control. So, you know, one of the things I'm sure they emphasize here is that you know, individual activity, individual invention is a very important source of economic growth and all the good things that happen to life, and that is true. But the social control, the rules of the game, are also something that's very important for determining just how that affects us all, and how much some people can get rich and how much some people can be left behind. And those are very important sides of the game too.
Thank you. This question is about your stand on foreign aid.
Okay.
And what would you say that the developed countries can do to help poor countries instead of giving?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually think, I have views that not everybody agrees with on foreign aid. So let me start with the bits that I think people do agree with and I think are very, very important. So first of all, I think that foreign aid can help a lot. So I'm often quoted as saying that foreign aid is no good. So let me start by saying that I think foreign aid can help a lot, provided it's done in the right way. And I think that there's a lot of stuff, including things to do with innovation and new science, where we can help a lot. So if you think of some of the greatest gifts that the rich world has given to the poor world, they've been to do with understanding, with basic science and processes that have been discovered in the rich world and which have brought untold benefits to the poor world. So if you go back far enough, the germ theory of disease, for instance, is something that was worked out at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century in Europe. The understanding that came with that has saved, you know, millions, indeed billions of lives around the world in the more than 100 years since then. And if you think of the vaccines, the understanding of keeping your hands clean, of basic hygiene, the need for sanitation, the need for clean water, those all come from basic understanding. Now, I know you guys are all in the high-tech sector. When you think of innovation, you don't think of a flush toilet, for instance, or something of the sort. But those in their days were incredibly important innovations, incredibly important advances in understanding, and they have brought great benefits to mankind. So, you know, there's a lot of diseases out there that you don't see in Sweden, we don't see in the United States, like malaria, for instance. I know when you think of diseases in poor countries, you think of something like Ebola, right? Some horrible disease. But Ebola is not very important compared with children who are dying of pneumonia, for instance, or children who are dying of malaria, and so on. And we could use a lot more money. I know Sweden already does this, but I think we should be spending even more money on these sort of things. And this whole span of technical assistance. When you think, for instance, we have all sorts of policies which hurt farmers in poor countries. It would be great if those policies, we could use some of our aid money to compensate the farmers in rich countries who are benefiting from these policies and have better policies, that help the poor farmers in Africa, for instance, sell their goods. So I'm very much in favor of spending money that sort of way. I find it very hard to understand why countries who give a lot of foreign aid are also very keen on selling arms around the world. We could pay off the arms manufacturers and drop the arms in the Baltic Sea or something. What I'm very skeptical about is whether giving large sums of money to poor countries is very helpful, and I think it has negative side effects that in some of the poorest countries actually offset the benefits of aid. So that's the part of my views that are more controversial. I'm talking too long, and you have an enormous list of questions here, so I'll try to get us out before dinner time.
To continue on the previous question, can we do, as a school, anything to help?
Actually, I think what you can do is what you do anyway, which is, you're young, you're the next generation of innovators. You're going to come up with great ideas. Some of these ideas will help all of mankind. Some of them will make some of you individually rich, which is great. You don't want to be ashamed of that. I think getting rich is a wonderful incentive to help you guys, when you'd really rather go watch a movie or go out for a drink with your friends, those of you who are old enough for that. Thinking about getting rich is what helps you get on with your studies, and those rewards for really good things are terrific. But there's big benefits to mankind too, and some of those will help poor people around the world. You can't predict what those are. So, follow your curiosity, try to come up with wonderful new things, and many of those will really help mankind. I don't think you can do better than that. You can't design your life in advance, so forget about that.
So, I think that was a really good end, if we are going to end that. It was really great to hear you talk, I must say that.
Thank you very much. I love coming to things like this, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. Go out there and do good for yourself and do good for the world. It's a really powerful force. Thanks for listening.
Well, I must say that it's not often that we have an audience that is this quiet. So perhaps some more times would be good to come here. I will now direct, if there are a question or a couple of questions from the audience for something that you would like to ask, something that pop up in your head, if anyone dares.
I have one.
Yes, please.
How is it to collaborate as a couple?
You should ask my better half.
It's a little bit challenging to collaborate with someone that you share so many other parts of your life with, but I can only speak for us. It's terrific as well because we can bounce ideas off of each other all the time. You probably do that with your friends here. What about this? What about that? Or this didn't work, and you're talking to someone who really understands when something doesn't work, how disappointing it is, or when something goes really well in the work, just how terrific that is. It means we work longer hours probably because it's not just at the office. We bring it home. You just don't pack it up and leave it there. When we're writing together, sometimes we fight over every word, which can be a little exhausting, and then one of us will give up and the other one writes the paragraph. But it's I think for us it's been quite terrific. We have some new work that's gotten quite a lot of attention, and that's been quite satisfying as well, that we can share that. You want to add?
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things of being married is you can wake up in the middle of the night and say, wake up, we made a mistake in the computer code. Say, can it wait until the morning? No. You got to fix that now. Question here.
What would you do in the example with this casino if someone gets so much of those, so they are outside of the system cannot bring them down and level it out anymore? What would you do then?
Sorry,
Oh,
Here,
so in a
here's the mic.
casino,
Oh,
the
yeah,
system
yeah.
doesn't level it down.
Right. Well, I think that's why I talked about you have to design systems that don't let one person take everything away. And actually, that's why most casinos, even casinos, have a limit, right? There's a limit on bets in really all casinos, because otherwise you can always bankrupt the casino if you have enough money by betting on the same number and doubling up every time. So you put 1 on, and you put 2 on the next time, 4 on, and then 8 on, and eventually you will break the bank. And the way casinos prevent that, from their point of view, is stopping you from, there's a limit on the size of the bet. So that's an example of a social mechanism, in this case by the casino, that stops someone automatically breaking the bank. But just to get away from the analogy for a minute, these social controls are very, very important. And I worry about that a lot, because I think I'm sort of in favor of a lot of inequality for the reasons that I talked about before, that you really need to reward people for the innovations and new things that they do. And what's more is, ex post, great successes, great breakthroughs cause a lot of inequality, because they're never equally spread. I mean, it would be nice if they were, but some people benefit before other people, and that causes inequality. But what worries me is if the people who are successful can use their money to stop other people benefiting. So if I stick with the innovation thing, for instance, if the previous generation of innovators protect their patents, for instance, by going to the government and lobbying and using their wealth to extend their own patents and to prevent the next generation of innovators coming up with the next innovation, then you really begin to worry about it. If people who've made huge sums of money manage to control the political process, then you have to do something about that, otherwise things get out of control. And those are things a lot of us worry about in the United States today. And even in Sweden, I know that there's really beginning to be a big increase in inequality at the very top of the distribution.
Thank you. I think we have to stop the questions there due to time. What I know about this is that these meetings inspire a lot among the youngsters here, and there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of anticipation before you came here, and there's going to be a lot of ideas roaming around, and also the word stamina, to have the courage to follow your dreams. It's something that we talk a lot about here, and it's very good to hear you also emphasizing these things. I would like to have a big applause for our guests here today. And we will start moving out.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Anyone who wants to take a photo op, you have to do it walking out here.